you've lived a long life already. You've worked, created, sacrificed, built, endured. You have carried responsibilities that were often unseen and held roles that shaped not only your days, but your identity. And now, a new chapter opens. A slower chapter. A quieter chapter. A chapter after work. After duty. After the constant movement of the past. Many people call this retirement. But Plato would have called it something else. He would have called it the beginning of your real life. Plato believed that a human being lives two kinds of lives. The first life is the life demanded by society. Expectations, roles, obligations, careers, duties performed because the world requires them. But the second life, the deeper life, the truer life, begins only when those outer roles loosen and the soul finally has space to speak. Plato wrote, "The greatest task of life is knowing oneself." Most people, he said, never truly begin this task until their later years. Not because they lack wisdom, but because they lacked time. They were too busy surviving, raising children, working through the day, meeting the needs of others. And so Plato believed that the latter half of life is not a decline, but an awakening, a return, a chance to meet the self that was hidden beneath decades of responsibility. You are not losing a role. You are returning to a self. But how do you rediscover yourself? After so many years of being someone for others, someone for your work, someone for your family, someone for the world? Plato begins with a simple idea. To know yourself, first notice your mind. When the noise of daily work disappears, another kind of noise can rise. Thoughts, doubts, memories, questions you never had time to ask. This is normal. This is part of the transition from outer life to inner life. Plato would say, listen, not with your ears, with your soul. The true self emerges when the external rush fades, not suddenly, like dawn, soft at first, barely visible, then gradually clearer. You may begin to wonder, what do I love? What do I fear? What do I value? Who am I when no one needs anything from me? These are not signs of confusion. They are signs of awakening. Signs that your mind is slowly turning inward, not in loneliness, but in discovery. Plato believed that the self is like a quiet companion who has walked beside you your whole life, waiting patiently for a moment like this, a moment when you finally have the time to look inward and say, I'm listening now. This is not the end of your life. It is the beginning of a more honest one. Take a breath. Feel the weight of the years behind you, not as something lost, but as something earned. You have lived enough life to know what matters and what does not. You have experienced enough to see through illusions and understand what is real. And now, in this quiet chapter, Plato invites you to ask, what is the purpose of my remaining years? He believed the answer was simple. To care for the soul, not in a religious sense, not in a moral sense, in a deeply human sense. The soul, he taught, is the part of you that thinks, the part that loves, the part that wonders, the part that hopes. And the later years of life are when the soul finally takes center stage. You are not done. You are entering the most important stage of living, the stage where you can finally become the person you always were beneath the roles. Plato believed that every person carries a true role, separate from what society assigns. A role not given, but discovered. A role not imposed, but revealed by listening to your deeper self. Your true role might be wisdom keeper, storyteller, guide, creator, learner, observer, mentor, or simply one who lives with clarity. In a confused world, you may think, but I am just one person. My life was ordinary. Plato would gently disagree. He would say, every soul is extraordinary. When it begins to know itself, you are not small. You are a lifetime of experiences, a collection of memories, a library of lessons that no one else on earth has lived in the same way. And now, freed from the noise of work, you finally have the space to let these lessons rise into meaning. This is the beginning of rediscovering who you truly are. Plato believed that the self is not found through grand achievements, but through quiet attention. He taught that a person becomes wise, not by adding more to life, but by removing what hides the essential. In your working years, you learned how to endure pressure, solve problems, support others, and stay strong through uncertainty. These were the skills needed for that chapter of life. But now, the skills change. The world no longer needs you to hurry. It needs you to see, to reflect, to understand, to share the clarity earned through experience. Plato would say that the second life begins with a shift from doing to being. You are not what you produce. You are not what you achieve. You are not defined by your role in a company or the title you once held. Those were masks. Important masks. Useful masks. But not you. Now that the masks have gently fallen away, the human beneath them can finally breathe. Many people fear this stage of life because they have never met themselves without a mask. They fear emptiness. They fear boredom. They fear having no purpose. But Plato would smile softly at this fear and say, you are not empty. You are spacious. There is a difference. Emptiness is the absence of meaning. Spaciousness is the absence of noise. And the absence of noise is precisely what allows meaning to grow. Plato believed that truth grows in quiet minds, that wisdom comes to those who are no longer rushing through life. He imagined the later years as a kind of return to the soul, a homecoming after a long journey. If you have ever felt lost in this transition, if you have ever wondered, what now? You are not alone. Plato saw this question not as a problem, but as the doorway to a deeper life. The question, what now, is really the question. What matters now? For decades, you gave your time to the world. Now, the world gives time back to you. How will you use it? Not in a pressured way, not in a forced way, but in a way that feels true to you. Perhaps you have passions that were pushed aside when life became too busy. Art, reading, music, walking quietly in nature, writing down your memories, restoring your body, healing old wounds, connecting with people in slower, more meaningful ways. Perhaps your true role now is to learn again, not for a career, but for curiosity. Plato believed that curiosity is the sign of a soul awakening. Or perhaps your role is to teach, not in a classroom, but through the way you live, through the calm you carry, through the stories you share, through the younger people you gently guide. with your lived experience. Plato wrote, "Education is not the filling of a vessel, but the turning of the soul. Your soul is turning now toward itself, toward calm, toward clarity. You may also feel regrets. Lives always contain them." Plato knew this, but he believed that regret exists only when the soul is ready to grow. Regret is not punishment. It is awareness, a sign that you're beginning to see what truly mattered all along. The key, he said, is not to stay in regret, but to reshape it into wisdom. Regret can soften the heart. Regret can refine priorities. Regret can teach what life did not teach earlier. And the beauty of this stage of life is that you finally have time to practice living with more intention, more honesty, more presence. This is not a second chance. It is your truest chance. The first chance is about survival. The second is about meaning. Plato believed that older age is not a collapse, but an ascent, a rise toward understanding, a lifting away from distractions, a movement toward the inner world that has waited quietly for decades. You have not finished your story. You are entering the chapter where the meaning becomes clear. Plato encourages you to see the years ahead, not as a shrinking of possibilities, but as a purification of them, a narrowing toward what truly matters, a sculpting of your remaining time into something beautiful, just as a sculptor chips away unnecessary stone to reveal the statue within. You can remove what no longer serves you. Old expectations, old fears, old roles, to reveal the person you always were beneath. This is the art of rediscovering yourself. And in Plato's view, it is the highest work a human can do. You are not stepping out of life. You are stepping into the deepest part of it. Plato believed that every human life contains two great journeys. The first is the journey outward, toward work, family, responsibility, toward what society needs from you. The second is the journey inward, toward truth, clarity, and self-understanding. For most of your life, your energy was pulled outward. You made decisions for others. You supported people who depended on you. Your value was measured in action, in what you could accomplish, in what you could withstand. But now the direction shifts. The journey turns inward. And this, Plato says, is where the real meaning of life unfolds. He believed that the soul has a natural desire to seek truth, but that this desire is often buried under noise and duty. When you finally have time, real time, the soul begins to rise again. This rising can feel unfamiliar. Some people describe it as restlessness. Some describe it as emptiness. Some as loneliness. But Plato believed it is none of these. It is awakening. When the outer world becomes quieter, the inner world becomes clearer. Thoughts that were suppressed for decades begin to speak again. Questions long ignored come back to the surface. And the self, your truest self, slowly steps forward. This is why retirement is not simply a lifestyle shift. It is a philosophical one. It is the moment when you begin to separate who you truly are from who you had to be. One of Plato's most famous teachings is the allegory of the cave. He describes people living in a cave, mistaking shadows on the wall for reality. Only when they step outside do they realize that life was much larger, much brighter, much deeper than they ever imagined. In Plato's view, Your later years are like stepping out of the cave, not because your earlier life was wrong, but because it was limited by necessity, by survival, by responsibility. Now you are finally free to see the world and yourself with clearer eyes. This clarity begins with a simple but profound question. What do I want the rest of my life to mean? Not what others want, not what the world expects, not what the past demanded, but what you choose. Plato believed that meaning is not given by age. Meaning is given by direction. You can be 80 and just beginning. You can be 70 and just discovering your true voice. You can be 60 and entering the most creative decade of your life. He would say, "You are not late. You are ready." One of Plato's deepest ideas is that the self grows whenever it turns toward truth. And truth is not found in noise, but in reflection. Reflection is not the same as overthinking. Reflection is quieter, gentler, more honest. It is sitting with your own life and seeing it clearly, not through regret, not through defensiveness, but through understanding. When you reflect, you begin to see the threads that connect your experiences. You see patterns. You see lessons. You see strengths you never recognized. And you begin to understand that everything you lived was preparing you for this chapter. Plato believed that older people hold a kind of wisdom that cannot be taught in youth. It is not academic. It is not professional. It is experiential. It is the wisdom of having lived through storms and seasons, wins and losses, beginnings and endings. He believed that society makes a mistake when it sees aging as decline. He saw it as refinement, a polishing of the soul, a distillation of what is essential. Young people are rich in potential. Older people are rich in clarity. And clarity, Plato would say, is the foundation of a meaningful life. As you move through this new stage, you may feel yourself drawn to quieter joys, walking without rushing, reading without purpose, listening to your thoughts, connecting more deeply with fewer people, letting conversations stretch softly instead of rushing them, returning to simple things that bring genuine contentment. These are not signs of aging. These are signs of awakening, signs that the soul is reclaiming its space. And with this awakening comes an important realization. You no longer have to live for approval. You no longer have to prove your worth. You no longer have to carry the expectations of others. You have lived enough life to understand the world has no final authority over who you are. Freedom, Plato believed, is not a political condition. It is a psychological one, a state of being where the self is no longer ruled by external judgments. True freedom is the ability to say, "This is my life now, and I choose how to live it." You earn this freedom, not through achievement, but through understanding. And the more you understand yourself, the more you realize that you are not beginning a slower life. You are beginning a deeper one. This is the heart of rediscovering the real you, a return to the self that has always been waiting, quietly, patiently, lovingly, just beneath the surface. The years ahead are not a closing. They are an opening. And Plato invites you to step through. Plato believed that the soul has a purpose, not given by society, and not taken away by age. This purpose does not disappear when work ends. In many ways, it becomes clearer, because only when noise fades does the inner voice grow audible. He would say that the years after retirement are not an afterthought. They are the time when the soul finally speaks freely. What does the soul speak about? It speaks about truth, about longing, about what you wished you had done, and what you still can do, about what genuinely matters. When the world stops pulling you in every direction, Plato believed that the later years of life hold a special gift, the ability to see life as a whole, not in fragments, not in fleeting demands, but in its full shape. When you look back now, you do not see isolated events. You see patterns. You see connections. You see how one decision led to another, how one season prepared you for the next, how joy and hardship shaped you equally. And because you can see life as a whole, you can now live the rest of it with clearer intention. Plato would encourage you to ask 3 questions. What do I wish to understand? What do I wish to express? What kind of person do I choose to be now? These questions are not about productivity, not about goals or achievements. They are about alignment, living in harmony with the person you have become. You might realize that you want to learn again, to think again, to read, reflect, write, observe. Plato believed that the life of the mind becomes richer, not weaker, with age. Or you may find that you want to give back, not through obligation, but through authenticity, to pass on wisdom, to listen deeply, to guide someone younger, not with authority, but with understanding. Or perhaps your true role now is simply to experience life fully, to savor quiet mornings, to reconnect with old passions, to rebuild relationships, to heal what was once too painful or too rushed to face. Plato never saw contemplation as passive. He saw it as the highest activity of the human spirit. A person who reflects is not withdrawing from life. They are entering its depths. He believed that the world is shaped by people who take time to understand it. And so he would say that the second half of life is when a person finally gains the ability to see clearly and therefore to live wisely. You are not stepping back. You are stepping inward. You are stepping upward. Plato imagined the soul as something that climbs, not physically, but intellectually and spiritually. It climbs toward truth, toward meaning, toward clarity. And that climb can happen at any age, but it happens most deeply when the world grows quiet enough for the soul to be heard. Now is that time. When you wake up tomorrow, you might feel something new, a sense of spaciousness, an inner invitation to live more intentionally, more honestly, more softly. You may feel drawn to sit with your thoughts and explore them gently, to read something slowly, not to finish it, but to understand it, to reconnect with a part of yourself that was waiting quietly behind years of responsibility. You may feel the freedom that comes with loosening expectations, the freedom to rest, to create, to change direction, to begin again, no matter your age. Plato would say that the true self is timeless. It does not age. When the body ages, it does not retire. When work retires, it does not shrink. When circumstances shrink, the soul, he believed, moves according to its own cycle. And often, its most important cycle begins precisely when society says, "You are finished." But you are not finished. You are unfolding. You are refining. You are awakening. This is not the closing chapter. This is the chapter where you become whole. Let yourself feel that truth. Let yourself rest in it. Let yourself trust that every step you took in your life has brought you here to a moment where you can finally ask, not, "What does the world need from me?" but, "Who am I meant to be now?" You have time. You have wisdom. You have clarity. You have a self that is ready to be rediscovered. Plato believed that the greatest journey is the journey toward oneself. And he believed that this journey begins exactly where you stand today. You are not late. You are not lost. You are not done. You are ready.